Do you have a really cool 3D character model, and you look at it and you say, damn it, if only I could dress my Daz character like that? Well, now you can, with this simple trick. For this tutorial, I'm going to be using this BigMediumSmall SWAT pack as my demo, but this same workflow can be applied to many other rigs as well. First, build or acquire your 3D character. Then, once you're done, copy and paste them into a new Blender scene. This scene will be our workspace. If your character has any extra bones, I recommend you select the armature and then go into pose mode. Select all the bones which are not part of the main skeleton. Then go to the bone collections and create a new layer. Call it Hidden. Then assign the selected bones to that layer. Make sure to unassign the same bones from any existing layers in the collection. Now, open up Daz Studio and load up your Daz character. They won't be needing any clothes, as we'll just be using the head. Open a new Blender scene and use Diffeomorphic to import your Daz character with your desired presets. Then select and copy that Daz character, and then paste it into your workshop scene. Resize your Daz character so the scales match. A good rule of thumb is to use X-ray mode and try to match up both characters' noses until they fit together like a jigsaw. Once they match up, parent the Daz armature to your 3D character's armature. You can now hide or delete your 3D character's head. Next up, now we need to remove all the mesh and bones belonging to our Daz character below the neck. Select your Daz character's armature, then open the bone collections. Unhide every layer so every bone is visible. In edit mode, delete every bone below the neck. Next, go back to object mode and select the Daz character's body, then go to edit mode. Switch to edge mode, then select a ring around the neck, preferably near the collarbone. Then right-click and select Edge Split. Delete all the mesh below the neck, so now only the character's head is left. Now, clean up the model by going to the Materials tab and selecting Remove Unused Slots. Then purge your scene of unused data. Now, your Daz head should seamlessly fit onto your 3D character's body. Next, let's start connecting these rigs together. Select the Daz armature and go back to the bone collections. Hide all the layers except the bones layer. In pose mode, select the neck bones and create a new layer. Call this neck bones. Assign the neck bones to that layer and then remove them from the bones layer. Now, hide every layer except the neck bones layer. Next, go to a side view. What you need to do now is edit this 3D rig so it matches up with your Daz rig's bone placement. Genesis 9 Daz rigs have 4 neck bones. Head, neck 2, neck 1, and spine 4. This BMS rig, on the other hand, has only 2, and they're not free-floating, but attached to one another. Other rigs will look different, with different layouts. So, if you need to switch your rig over to use stick bones, then go over to the Armature's Data tab and select Viewport Display, then switch the display to stick. Now, my BMS rig has a problem. This lower neck bone has weight paint for the collar, and I want to pose my Daz character's head without moving the collar. So, I'll need to make some slight edits to this BMS rig. First, I'm going to make this head bone a floating bone. So, I select the BMS armature and then go to edit mode. I then select the head bone and then right-click and select Split. Then, I select the top tip of this lower neck bone and move it down and out the way. Remember, the bottom tip of any bone is where the pivot point will be in pose mode. Next, I shorten this head bone, then duplicate it twice for Daz neck bones 2 and 1. Now, your 3D character's rig should have a bone for each Daz neck bone. For example, I have BMS's head bone for my Daz head bone, then I have 2 duplicated bones for Daz's neck 2 and 1, and then finally I have BMS's original neck bone for Daz's spine 4 bone. Make sure the original head bone stays at the top, so anything weight painted to that bone stays in place when we pose the character. Go back to Object Mode and select both rigs, and then go to Edit Mode. Select the Daz head bone's bottom tip, and then right-click and select Snap, Cursor to Selected. Then select the bottom tip for your 3D character's head bone, and then go to Snap, selection to cursor. Repeat the same actions for the top tip so that the head bone overlaps the Daz head bone. Once you've done that, repeat the exact same actions again for the two bones we duplicated, so both Daz neck bones are covered. Leave spine 4 alone, as we'll be using this to connect the Daz rig to the 3D character's rig. Once done, go back to Object Mode and hide the Daz rig. Select your 3D character's rig and then go to Edit Mode. Parent the head bone to the duplicated bone below it. And then parent that bone to the bone below it. Then parent that bone to the 3D character's spine, reconnecting it back to the full skeleton. Now, select the 3 neck bones. Make sure snapping is set to ruler. Select the snap icon or hold Ctrl, and then move the bones over 2 spaces. Next, unhide the Daz rig and select it. In Edit Mode, select all 4 bones, and then right-click and go to Parent and Clear. This is important, as it will stop the bones from interfering with one another later on. Now, it's time to start retargeting this Daz rig, so, in my case, this BMS rig can control it. First, in Object Mode, select both armatures and go to Pose Mode. Then select the Daz head bone and then go to the bone constraints. Add in an armature constraint. Now, first, click the button called Add Target Bone. Then, set the object as your 3D character's rig. Then, set the target as your 3D character's head bone. Repeat these same actions for every Daz neck bone until you reach the bottom. Now, you can see my BMS neck bones can now control the Daz neck bones. But there's still one more thing to do, which is to give my BMS neck bones Daz's limitation constraints. To do this, select your 3D character's bone, then select its corresponding Daz bone. Go to the Limit Rotation constraint and select this little drop-down arrow. Click Copy to Selected. That will transfer that constraint to your 3D character's bone. Now, repeat that same action for every neck bone once again. When you're done, go back to Edit Mode and select your 3D character's neck bones. Hold Ctrl and then move them back 2 spaces so they overlap the Daz bones. Now, everything is set up. To finish up, select your Daz armature. In the bone collections, hide the neck bones layer and then unhide the bones layer to bring back the face rig. Now, when I post my BMS rig, the Daz rig will mimic the BMS neck bones. This means you can use Diffeomorphic's expression morphs without having to worry about causing any compatibility issues if you were to try and join the 2 rigs together. Now, sit back, relax, and pose and relight your Daz hybrid character to your heart's content. Thanks for watching. Remember to join my Patreon if you want to help out. And as always, don't forget to like and subscribe.